okay, I'm going to wait for this exact mast cycle. I'm going to jump in there because I know the deer are going to use it the same way that they did in the past because nothing's changed. The mast is the same, the bedding's the same, the terrain's the same. So I'll jump into those same exact areas and find success in them.
I was like, well, if I throw a mic on, then I can help others the way that these people have all helped me.
Born in the heart of the Pennsylvania deer camp, with the help of experts, friends, and local legends, we bring you valuable knowledge and powerful stories for your hunting adventures. Welcome to the East Meets West Hunt Podcast with your host, Beau Martonik.
All right, we're live. John Prokop, welcome to my house.
Well, I'm excited. Heard good things about it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to get to come do this in person and get to hang out. We've been talking about doing a podcast for quite a while, and I'm glad we get to make it work.
Yeah. I think we were talking about it maybe a year or so ago.
Yeah.
My schedule, working the off shifts, didn't really line up very good. So kind of got put on the back burner, but here we are.
Yeah, and two, I mean, you work an off shift, but every other hour of the day is in the woods, which I don't blame you. That's a good way to be able to live for sure.
Oh yeah, I love being out there. I love every part of the whole experience, putting all the puzzle pieces together, and it's been a really fulfilling lifestyle so far.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to watch. You know, I follow you on social media, and I didn't know you for a while, but I knew your brother Ty for a long time.
For sure.
Yeah, so it was cool to. It was actually funny how. I don't remember. I don't think that was the first time we actually met. Maybe it was, but when you drove by me while I was taking a buck out of the woods, and so that we were talking and everything there. But you put a ton of time into the woods in Pennsylvania, New York, and chasing whitetails, but also looking for elk too.
Yeah, chasing elk.
Yeah, everything
that you can do out there.
Yeah,
I put a little more passion into some things than others, but for the most part, I mean, anything outside I love to do.
Yeah. And so have you always been that way? Is that something that you've been doing kind of your whole life?
Yeah, so I've been pretty much a avid bow hunter for the last 10 years, but prior to that, I cut my teeth rifle hunting. I think 12, 13 years old, started with my dad, my brothers and stuff, and I wasn't as serious about it back then, being so young, but I'd say after about the age of 20, I really started to put more time into looking for mature bucks and scouting. I mean, at that time, it was more, your local honey hole, hit one area, hunt it, and whatever happened. But over the last couple of years, it just turned into way more than that.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And because like I said, I, see it through Instagram, but even just through talking to you, it's like every waking moment that it seems like you're out in the woods. And, you work second shift, correct?
I worked second shift for 6 years. Now I am currently on day shift, 6 to 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you like that better?
Okay, it's definitely going to cut back a little bit on my woods time during hunting season.
Yeah.
And shed hunting season, more importantly. But, I mean, as of fitting everything in, getting the gym in, getting work in, and then getting out into the woods, relationships, friendships, that type of stuff, it definitely seems like it's working a little bit better for me. Just because being on an off shift, I can't do anything in the evenings. So I'm pretty much locked up. I can get up early, get out in the woods, do my scouting, run my cameras, but it left a lot for the evenings.
Yeah.
Tired.
No, I mean, that's that trade-off. When I worked second shift for a short period of time, it was nice for the woods because you can get up,
Yeah.
I mean, it sucks because you're low on sleep a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
You lose sleep
It's a grind.
when you're doing it, but you had that time. The problem is you don't have a life outside of it.
You don't, exactly. It becomes pretty much most of your life, I mean.
Yeah. But 6 to 2 is a good day shift schedule if you're going to have, like, getting done at 2:00, especially early on in the season. You still got a whole, you can pull an evening hunt, quite often.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's basically going to be the bread and butter. try to, hunt as many evenings as I can. And then, if I get to the rut and I haven't killed a buck, start using my vacation. But
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I got a good month of, being able to hunt evenings and, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I kind of want to, I want to talk a little bit about, even though it's not this podcast is going to go out in October, but so I know it's not really timely, but shed hunting, I think we'd be mistaken if we didn't kind of talk about that, because that is something that you put a lot of emphasis in. And so I want to hear a little bit about that, and then also how much does that affect, or does that help you, come the fall? So yeah, give me a little, like, why shed hunting? Like, what's your fascination with it?
Okay. I mean, I think a lot of it was just the adventure of it. Hunting season's not in. You're not putting pressure on your areas. You don't got a whole lot to worry about in that case. You can kind of roam free however you want to. And I mean, there's just something about finding shed antlers off of your target bucks that you're after. It gives you just like a concrete object. Like, okay, this is real. I'm in the game.
Yeah.
I'm a step closer to this buck. But like I said, I mean, it just. I never used to be that way too. I mean, there was a time where I had a couple buddies where they're like, hey, you should go shed hunting. I think you'd like it. And I was like 19, 20 years old. And I'm like, why would I want to do that? I was just more into archery hunting and rifle hunting and stuff. Like, why would I want to do that? But there was one year I was just out going for a hike. It was February, walking this bottom, dewberry bottom. And I had a camera on this bottom with a really nice buck at the time, maybe 125, 130 inch 8-point. And 10 years ago, that was a really big buck to me.
Yeah.
So I'm like grabbing the camera, looking around, and I look down in the snow, and there's probably like 6-7 inches of snow in this bottom. And I look down and I just see tines sticking out. And I'm like, oh man, did somebody leave their rattling antlers here? What's going on here? Because I never found any sheds prior to that. And I pick it up, and there's that 8-point set side by side in the snow. And like that day on just kind of like sparked something for me. I don't know if it was the dopamine rush of just, finding them, picking them up. I was like, wow, this is really cool. But, ever since that day, it just really turned into, covering as much ground as possible and scouting as many places. And I mean, I've only actually killed one buck that I had sheds off of. I've had, a few good opportunities with them. So I don't think I'm not going to say it 100% is going to correlate to success in the fall.
Yeah.
But
I mean, at the same time, you're learning those areas too. So that, even if it's not that specific deer that you're shooting,
right,
it's like you still get all that time out there. And for anybody listening, you dropped a good piece of knowledge there with the dewberry, with finding sheds. Like I find a lot of sheds dewberry,
especially on those cold winters.
The cold winters,
the cold winters are definitely when they key on them. When we get a mild winter, I don't see nearly the activity down in those dewberries.
Yep. Yeah. Last couple of years haven't.
No. I maybe found 4 or 5 in the dewberries last year. Most of them have been in the oaks, but like you said though, it's really good for starting to learn deer behavior, and you kind of just start picking up on like key. Okay, how the deer were bedded there in the winter, what they're feeding on. And I mean, the more time you spend out there doing those things, it makes you a better outdoorsman.
Yeah.
The little details.
And some things, sometimes those things don't even click right when you see them.
Exactly.
But then later, it comes back around. The more time you spend, it's like, oh wait, I've seen this before.
Oh yeah.
It's pretty cool how that all works. And I think springtime, whether scouting, shed hunting, combination of them is by far what has helped me the most as far as success in the fall, because of just all the time spending out there. And honestly, I like it maybe even more than the hunting season, just because it's
pressure,
fun.
No pressure on it. You're out just exploring the areas, and you're putting critical puzzle pieces together that are going to pay off eventually for you.
Yeah. No, that that makes a ton of sense. And then, you're also into the elk sheds.
Oh yeah.
Like I think that's one of the most impressive things is how many elk sheds you pull out every year. Cause I know how hard that is. And like, you got to be on top of those.
Yeah. And there's so much pressure anymore out there. And like, it's great. People are getting outdoors looking for them. I'm an advocate for that, but it has definitely gotten tougher trying to find them because I mean, any of the food plots in the state forest, all that stuff gets walked daily. I mean, there's people coming out of state, getting Airbnbs. I want to find an elk shed. It's kind of like a bucket list thing for them. Like, hey, I want one elk shed for my camp. And like, you get a mass flock of people doing that. It makes it tough. And, you get guys that they don't know what they're doing yet. And they'll spook the elk and kick them out of the areas they're at, and they're not as much like whitetail. You kick them out of an area, they don't come back nearly as fast.
Yeah,
they're really nomadic. They keep moving. So
yeah, no, that's exactly right. And it's funny because I'll get a bunch of messages of people like, hey, what do you have any ideas of like where should I start looking for elk sheds? I'm like, man, I think you're asking the wrong guy. Like for one, and like I almost sound pessimistic, and I don't mean to be, but I just be like, if you're okay with not going home with something, just go walk and try. Because I said, and they can be in different places year after year, depending on where they're at when they fall. It's like, you just got to find the elk, And
that's the hardest part.
We were talking about that before we started recording as you're helping doing some guiding this year and stuff on the elk side. And you're like, the hardest part is just finding the elk.
Right, with how expansive the terrain is out here. I mean, they have a lot of places they can hide. And like you said, the hardest part is just locating them. And once you find them, you don't put a whole lot of pressure on them. Sit back and you try to glass them early in the morning and the evenings if you have the time. And like I said, you don't want to bump them, though, because you bump them and, man, they're not coming back for a little while.
yeah, they're not as much like deer that you bump them once or twice, he's going to come back because it's like,
it's his core, his home range. And these elk, I mean, I've seen them move, from September to almost March, 15 miles. You don't see too many whitetail doing that.
No, it's crazy, and it is funny that they do that. I mean, they do that out west, but seeing that happen in PA is kind of crazy.
It is.
And like this past year, I went into my whole family. We usually do like one weekend a year where we do like a family elk shed trip.
Okay.
And we struck out bad. Like did not find any elk sign in areas that we've done, well in the past. And we did like, I think that one day we did 14 miles and we had 5 of us covering ground. So man. And we didn't turn up anything. It's like that's just the reality of it.
That's the game, yeah. I mean, and your dad has a lot of good success looking for elk sheds.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen some of his sets. They're big. I mean, they're some good bulls. I mean, but yeah, it's a completely different game, and it's more just something fun to do because if you're completely dead set on taking one home, like don't get your hopes up too much. I mean, if you find them, great, cherish the moment, but I mean, there's just so many factors that go into that.
Yeah, we I remember, and I don't know, I don't put much time into it now, so I don't really deserve to find them, but like I used to put quite a bit of time, and I've never found one, and I've been with people a lot that have found them, and it's never been me. It was funny, one of my good friends was like, hey, I want to go elk shed hunting. He's from the area too, and he was just like, yeah, I'll go. I was like, listen, I said, he picked a spot on a map, I believe him or me, I don't remember, but it was like middle of nowhere, very remote. Yep. And I was like, let's go look. And we climbed all the way up from the bottom, got to the top. We're like, all right, let's split up. And he walked like 10 feet and found one. He's like, here's one. I was like, what? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I was a little jealous, but it is pretty fun to get to do that. And it is sweet that, Pennsylvania has the elk to do it. I mean, you've done a lot with photography, and is that something kind of new in the last few years?
Yeah, last couple years, I've always had a camera and I've dabbled a little bit in it, but anymore, something clicked with it, and I love taking it out with me because like at first it was a hassle, like, oh, why do I want to lug this big camera and big lens around? Like, it's kind of a pain in the butt, but like I said, after I started taking some photos and getting a little bit better, learning how to edit stuff, it really stuck with me, and it's something I want to, keep pushing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I love looking at your photos and stuff and seeing like all the cool stuff and the shedding velvet pictures you had this like at the time of recording this a few weeks ago were like, yeah, that was pretty cool to see.
I appreciate that. And I always try to get a few of them a year, because you only have a couple days for some of those bulls. Once they get that itch, they start shedding it fast, and you got a little window of time. And if my schedule doesn't line up right, it can be kind of hard. But definitely got a couple good ones this year. I mean, I got a couple videos I still got to put together, and working on that stuff. But it's just, like I said, it's just something I've kind of been fascinated with, and it's cool to see the growth in velvet and then hard horned and
see their behaviors change.
They get more aggressive and
because I've seen you've been putting trail cameras on wallows and some of the cool footage you get from that.
Yeah, it's unique. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool to be able to see that. But kind of transitioning back into whitetails a little bit. I want to talk about last season for you. So you shot a really nice buck last year. What was he, a 9 or a 10?
9.
Yep. 9. Okay. Yeah, big 9 point. And so talk a little bit about that season from kind of like the beginning. What kind of your expectations were.
Okay.
Just talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, so I went into the 2023 season. I did all my preseason scouting. It looked like the areas I was hunting, there was a very good mass crop. So there was a very good mass crop, red oak acorns, not very many chestnut oak, not very many white oak. It was a predominant red oak year. And just with my previous scouting in the area, there was a couple nice bucks in there, a lot of laurel, some thick bedding areas. And so I pretty much knew right off the bat it was going to be a pretty decent season, just historically wise. And it was a little slow beginning in October. I mean, a lot of nighttime activity coming out into the oak flats and stuff. My target bucks were on my cameras. I had 2 in the area, a big 8 and a nice 10 point. I had both the shed antlers off of them, so I was like really, really hoping to get a crack at them. And I had 2 years of shed antlers off the 10 point, but he ended up busting his brows too because there was so much like concentrated activity. They were fighting like crazy and stuff, and so I hunted, a few mornings in October. I'm more of a rut hunter myself. I like late October, and especially working these off shifts. I could only hunt mornings. I have very few evenings to my disposal, so trying to go in there in the mornings in October was just pretty tough. You had to have the perfect wind, and the west wind would completely blow these deer out of the flats and stuff. So it was very tough. It was definitely a better evening setup than it was a morning setup. And so I would say about late October, third week October to be exact, 22nd, 23rd, things started to heat up. Started to heat up really good. I started to get a bunch of daylight activity. And last year I was helping out doing some elk stuff, elk guiding and providing some intel, stuff like that. So I missed a few days in that late October time frame. I think we got like a really, really good front of rain. And I mean, I had every target buck just moving in daylight that day. And I was out retrieving an elk. And I'm just like, oh man, come on, There's, the bucks I've been dreaming about all season in daylight. And I'm, in a completely different area, not being able to hunt. So got to about the end of October, things really started to pick up for me. I was sitting on this doe bedding area, primary scrape, really close to doe bedding, and I think it was maybe the 28th, 29th October, that time frame, and I'm sitting in my stand, and I look over at this scrape, and of course, I didn't set up right on it. I was just I thought they would kind of hook towards me a little bit. Well, I'm sitting there, and I look over, and there's my target buck, big 8 point. 7.5-year-old deer. I have a couple sheds off of him as well. I look over, dude, and I've seen some decent deer in the stand, and like I start shaking. I'm like, dude, I'm finally seeing him, a target buck that I'm actually after this year. And I'm watching him. Of course, didn't bring my camera that morning, didn't get any footage of him. Sitting there watching and working this scrape, this licking branch, just going to town on it. And he hooks the other way around me. And I'm like, dude, that was my one opportunity, Oh. So I sat there a couple more days right after that as the wind permitted. I saw a basket, 105-inch buck kind of following some does around. Not what I was after, 2.5-year-old, maybe 3.5-year-old. It was hard to tell, but so, and it had to be one of those seasons too. Like I was in the game, there was a lot of nice bucks in the area, but I had all these encounters, starting to get these encounters, and I just could not get them into bow range. So we got into the first week in November, and that 10-point I was telling you about, I got 2 sets off of him. Got set up, and he came cruising the backside of me the one morning. And like I said, I thought for sure he was going to be coming right by my stand. He ended up just 50 yards away, and I'm watching him, 45, 50 yards, no shots on him. Like, okay. So the next day, I'm like, I'm going to jump in and get set up right where he was coming through at. He comes right underneath my hang on.
No. I was just gonna ask if they were all in like the same area, if you were gonna move, and then you did.
Yeah. You never know. Like I said, he the fact like you got to move fast, you got to make good decisions, and I'm like, well, okay, he was there the day before, so I'm gonna jump in there, and like I said, 50 yards away the other way, and like at that point, I'm just kind of like face palming, like this season's not going to come together for me. I mean, it just like, but it was nice to have the encounters, enjoy the whole process being out there. But I'm just like, man,
it gets frustrating.
Yeah.
And I would have done the exact same thing. It's like, okay, the activity is here. Like, this is where I'm seeing them. I need to go there.
Yeah.
And sometimes that bites you in the ass.
It does. Yeah. Because you always hear that too. Like, oh, you see a nice buck, or you see a doe walk a trail, you see a nice buck falling by, quick move and jump up on it. And it can work out for sure. But like in that instance, I mean, it definitely didn't pan out for me.
Yeah.
So it was about a couple days later, I went back in there, first week in November. Pulling some cards real quick. I think it was a Sunday. Yeah, it was a Sunday, pulling some cards, seeing the activity, the stuff that the cameras I couldn't check. And I'm like standing there getting ready to check one of my cards, and I look over, and here comes this freaking 10-point chasing this doe. And I had some footage of it on my Instagram, just grunting up a storm chasing this doe right off this bedding. And I'm like, oh man, it's definitely starting to pick up. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll hunt this a couple more times. So I hunt that, complete, bust. Hunt 2 more days in there, just no activity. I don't know if at that point maybe they were in lockdown with some of the does and the activity wasn't that good. But then jump to November 12th. That's the day that I actually ended up harvesting my mature buck. And I got set up back in that old area where I had that 10-point, and I got set up. I had my target buck come right underneath me like 15, 20 minutes before daylight. I could just see him, and I had a cell camera there that sent me a picture while he was underneath me. And I'm just like, dude, this ain't going to come together for me. Like how close can you come without getting it done? So he comes underneath me, and like I'm not going to try to capitalize on something like that. If I don't got a good shot on him, I'm not wounding stuff. I mean, it was probably shooting light, but it was hard to see the pins and stuff. So I rode out that spot for a couple more hours, and I'm just sitting there, I know the wind was forecasted to change later in the evening, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear a couple grunts, and 2 bucks come chasing a doe like 50 yards around me in the laurel. 2 10-points, the one that I have the 2 years of sheds off of. And I mean, like I'm trying to, using my bleed, I'm using grunts, I'm like trying to stop these bucks, but they're so dead set on her that, I mean, they want nothing to do with it. They got one thing on their mind. It's hard to pull them from that.
Yeah.
So the wind was shifting. I ended up relocating for the evening, and which was hard to leave that spot too, because I'm like, okay, dude, there's a doe that's pretty close to heat, probably. I had 3 mature buck encounters that morning, but I'm like, I better. I like the wind in my favor. My confidence completely goes down if I don't have the wind in my favor. So I relocated for the evening, and this was a spot that I checked one time that year. And there was some pretty good sign. It's just notorious doe bedding. There's a little bit of laurel. It's a point. And these deer just kind of like stage off onto this point, and they always bed there. So I'm like, okay, we're going to jump in there. And I'm pretty sure it switched to a west wind that day. So I was positioned on the ridge. I had a crosswind like this, and I was watching both sides of the ridge like this. So like it kind of lined up pretty good for me. And I had a climber that day. I didn't have any hang-ons in that area. So I throw the climber on the back, start walking up the ridge, get set up, and anytime I'm scouting, I always mark my trees. I'm sure you do the same thing. Like if I'm in an area, I want to know, okay, I want to have at least a tree or 2 for different winds. So got the climber set up, start climbing up this tree, and like I said, not a whole lot of cover. There's a little bit of laurel on it, but just enough. And 30 minutes into the hunt, I got some longbeards out in front of me. And I'm like, oh, man, are turkeys still in? And then I'm like, oh, I don't have any orange, So, and then they actually weren't in. They went out that Saturday because I was hunting, I think it was the first Sunday you're allowed to hunt in archery season. Yeah, it was the first Sunday you're allowed to hunt in archery season that fell in there.
Yep.
And they weren't seasoned, so I'm like, okay, they started scratching around me, moved off the ridge. Sitting there, all of a sudden I hear a little bit of crunching to my right. I look, and there's a couple does coming down below me, actually. I'm like, okay, well, we're starting to get some activity, and it's maybe 3:45. I'm watching them. They kind of go off down over, and I just, all of a sudden, I just hear a twig snap behind me, and I happen to turn. I look over my shoulder, and I just see, good rack. I don't got much time. This buck is full cruise. You know how it is.
Oh yeah.
you gotta just follow through everything. I mean, I had, maybe 25, 30 seconds, and he's cruising just off. Isn't catching my scent because of that crosswind like this. And I mean, I don't even remember it, to be honest. I stood up, drew back, and he was just getting into that laurel about 28, 30 yards, and I gave a little grunt with my mouth, and I mean, he stopped dead and just looked right up toward my direction, and I just let it rip. I put it right behind the front shoulder, and I mean, he didn't go. Like the shot sounded good right off the bat.
Yeah.
It was like 4:15, 4:30, just not too far from the light ending, but like I said, he took off, went maybe 50, 60 yards, and heard him crash. And then I'm like, okay, everything looked good. I think I might have hit him a little bit high, but I'm going to give him some time, And I'm like, kind of just looking back, literally complete dead silence. So I'm like, okay, I think I got him, Start making some phone calls. I'm like, getting ready for the retrieval, and I get down, and of course, like I said, right before light, I didn't get any really good pictures. I didn't get to document a whole lot of it just because of the lighting experience, but I get up to him, and, absolute, gorgeous buck. I mean, wasn't my main target buck, but I mean, he was 7.5 years old.
Yeah,
so I mean, you can't ask for,
No.
A whole lot more than that. He had like 10.5 G2s, which were the biggest G2 buck I've ever killed.
Yeah,
so.
that deer is an absolute giant. Like that's a big deer.
Yeah, I think about it, like all the hunters that buck probably saw and survived, and I mean, he was tattered up too. I mean, you know how the mountain bucks are.
Yeah.
Ears were all freaking gouged out.
Oh, I love that.
Brisket, freaking tine punctures in it. I mean, just a gnarly old buck.
Yeah.
And then it was like that. My season came to an end, and it was bittersweet, Like I just remember sitting on that ridge, and I'm watching the sunset go down, and I'm like, man, this is what it's all about, putting in all that time, and here I am. I think I just got my buck, and just trying to cherish the moment of it.
Oh yeah, and yeah, the fact, like, it's, you were talking about, you had incredible encounters, but you were feeling like nothing was lining up. And then all of a sudden, one moment just changes everything. And then you're sitting there and the sun's going down and you're like,
yeah, just basking.
Best season ever.
Yeah. Like I said, it's one of those things you got to stay positive with it. I mean, it can become such a grind at times because how much guys like ourselves put into it. I mean, day after day, morning, evenings, and, all the scouting and everything. And it just, you got to stay positive with it.
As I was listening to you talk, through late October into November and stuff there, it sounds like, were you hunting specific doe groups or in between them, or how are like some of your setups? Like, what do you like from a setup standpoint, or what makes you decide like this is the tree I need to be in?
Yeah. So I'm first off, I'm a big mast hunter. I love the mast crops, and I specifically target areas that have good red oak acorns and even chestnut oak, because a lot of times that can last pretty late in the season. It always seems like the white oak around here, they're a tease because they get cleaned up so early. I mean, you got maybe a week or two into the opener, unless like you have hundreds of acres of, white oaks around, but pretty much it's dispersed around here. I'm sure you've seen the same thing. But for the most part, I love targeting the doe groups mostly, and I like thick cover. I like those thick ridges. I'm a big elevation guy. I love hunting up high. I like those crosswinds, like I was saying before. Like in that aspect, I had the crosswind in my face. I'm watching both sides of this ridge, and the cover's right here. So that buck's kind of just cruising like this, with the cover, and the wind's blowing right up in my face, and he's right in front of me like that. But for most of late October, early November, I'm targeting the doe groups, and then as we get into second, third week of November, then I'll kind of get into the more funnels between the doe groups, and I'm not like as focused on thick cover at that stage of the rut, because it seems like there's more cruising, it's not nearly as much bed to feed type of stuff. So
and you're in that later part, you're getting those. And I've talked about it with a few guys here on some podcasts, but like where I see is like the biggest of the big moving at that time, and they're covering ground. They're looking for those last does.
Exactly.
They're out moving. I think that's probably the best time you can find as I call it, the zombie mode. Yeah. Where they're just it's like
you can
this
see it in
buck
their
only
face.
does this like once a year, and there he is. He's just you look at him, and it's like he's not thinking about anything.
He's not there. Yeah.
No, he's not even mentally there.
Yeah. That's definitely the best time to take advantage of that, because they got one thing on their mind, and I mean they're cruising, they're covering as much ground as they can, and I mean that's the best time, I think, for those funnels. Yeah. In the big woods, at least.
Do you put much emphasis on, or with how much time you put in the woods, do you know when certain doe groups come in? Like as far as like, oh man, this is really good late October, November. Do you pay attention to that at all?
So I usually, with how many cameras I run anymore, I usually try to key in on stuff like that, because I've had areas where, as early as October 17th, 18th, all of a sudden I'll see a surge of activity. And that's pretty much the only thing I can think of is a certain doe group coming into, estrus, or, getting near at least. Yeah. But like I said, I do try to use my trail cam data a little bit to look back historically on that. Like, oh, hey, October 17th, 18th, there was a good push of daylight activity. I had, 3-4 daylight bucks on camera. I do try to hunt stuff like that. Yeah. That's definitely in my strategy. But, there's also, factors, too, that you can't control when the does are going to come into heat. But, I definitely do keep an eye on that.
Yeah. And do you spend a lot of time? Do you have like a rule of like, all right, I'm going to hunt this tree if the wind's good for X amount of days, or do you bounce around quite a bit? How do you kind of look at that?
So normally, we'll say late September, I try to lock down on one area, and it's very hard to do. a guy like yourself, you know, you got so many areas, so many pins, cameras all over the place. It's easy to get into that, like, juggle and stuff. You get, oh, hey, there's a good buck on this area, but you really haven't been there much this year. And so I try to keep it one area that I know is going to heat up, where I have some history, some target bucks in those areas. And I mean, like I said, I try to stay focused on that mostly. And
no, that's a good. I mean, I need to be listening to that again because it's so difficult to do that when you have so many areas. And I know how much time you put in the woods and how many areas you cover. Mm-hmm. It's super hard to be like locked down on this spot.
Tunnel vision on a spot. And I talked about this last year. I had a couple different areas that I went in on a Sunday, late October, and I pulled some cameras. And I mean, I had some nice bucks in daylight right there. This one spot in particular, I was going to check the card, and it's just a nice doe bedding area, and it just topographically it lines up perfectly too, because there's like a nice pinch point in this flat with laurel, and I mean, like, there's a oak flat out to the left hand side of it, and that flat had more acorns than anywhere else. So these does were predominantly feeding in that flat, and I had this camera set up right on this pinch point. These does would come back and go to bed. Well, I didn't want to go in the bedding and spook them, so I came around that oak flat. I figured they're not feeding in daylight, and I'm going through, and I go to check this camera, and I kick up this hammer 8-point, low 130s. You know, he gets up, and he was literally just bedded right in that travel quarter, waiting for those does, you know, to come out of the bedding and, you know, go into that flat. And I'm like, oh man, am I making a mistake here? Because I should be hunting this. And then there's another part of me. It's like, you're having activity in your other areas. Like, you're gonna stay the course and try to stay strong with that. And it gets hard though.
Yeah, yeah, and like. And also, I like what you're saying about, like, okay, you have this one area you're focused on, but you have these other areas. You're still checking them in case, you know, whether it's a bunch of people come in or maybe they start logging or anything can happen.
Exactly.
You can pivot to without much, you know, stress about it.
Yeah, those variables that are just outside of your control sometimes. And, you know, pressure, all of a sudden you get some guys that came in for a camp for the weekend, and boom, you know, there's 4 or 5 guys in that area, and it's like, okay, well, I'm probably not going to spend too much time here, but it's always cool just to kind of, you know, keep those satellite areas and, you know, even just gain history too. I mean, see how they use the area, you know, see what kind of scrape activity. I mean, you never know how it's going to pay off in the future is how I look at it.
So as far as specific trees, do you bounce around trees often? And you're a big preset guy, right? Like, you like to put a lot of presets out?
I do, yeah. I will put a couple hang-ons out for different wind directions, and I do have some different stands, mostly just for different wind directions, or, you know, say it's a newer area and I'm not 100% certain. The sign's there, but I don't know exactly how the deer are using it yet, just because I haven't historically sat in there. Yeah. So, I mean, I will have a couple different trees if one doesn't work out. Yep. I mean, I don't trim anything. I just get set up, and whatever's there is there. You know, you got to play the lay of the land. But
yeah. And as far as, like, okay, so say you have, I'll just make a scenario for you. Say you have 4 presets in an area. Maybe it's around one ridge or 2 ridges or whatever. Are you moving just based off wind direction? Say if you have a west wind for 4 days in a row, will you sit in that good west wind stand for those 4 days, or will you bounce between them?
Well, first it's going to depend too what's going on with the sign. Okay, say I hit those 2 ridges, and say there's very little sign on one ridge, and that west wind stand has all the sign. I mean, obviously I'm going to sit in that for the 4 days, but like I said, it kind of depends the variables. I mean, I try to, especially in the late October time frame, I try to give a sit or a stand 3 to 5 good sits, and then, like I said, I'll kind of reassess and see. I've had times where all of a sudden the acorns seem like they rotted up or they got cleaned up, and like that sign's just going cold on me. So, like, I'm not seeing the scrapes, or they're leafing over. There's no fresh rubs, and it's like, okay, you know as well as I do, those bucks in late October, they're rubbing constantly.
Yep.
They're searching for those doe groups, especially at night, And if that sign isn't there, I have a hard time. I'll start,
Time to move.
time to start moving around. I mean, there's nothing better though when you hit that area and that sign is just fresh. It's just opening up overnight, and it's like, okay, I'm in the game. But I mean, I'll take the sign a little bit more over the trail camera data.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, because you know as well as I do, you're only getting a tidbit of what's going on there, and those bucks chasing does in the rut. Oh, it can be so freaking random.
Yeah. and the especially in areas with mast, I think that is so important because like you said, that can be super hot for a period of time, and then they're either scooped up or they rot out, or like you said, and then it's like a ghost town, and it can happen really quick.
Yeah, I had that happen one time where this was a newer area, and I had a couple cameras in the year before, and there were some really solid bucks. The genetics were just really good in this area. And I'm like, oh man, this is going to be the year I kill something out of here. I had a couple, trees picked out.
Yep.
Well, I go in there first week of October, big rubs opening up. There's a little bit of oaks in there, not a whole lot, but I'm seeing these huge, just big diameter trees getting rubbed. I'm like, that's definitely a good one, or a signpost rub, because I didn't have a camera on it. But so I go back in there about third week of October, and there isn't any fresh rubs. Like those ones from the weeks prior just starting to go cold already. I'm like, okay, I don't think I'm going to spend a whole lot of time. I'll put some more cameras in here, but I'm gonna go to some of the other areas because I like having that concentration. I like having those does, predictable with the mast like that, and I just kind of hunt around them, try not to spook them, and I mean it's paid off for me in the past. So
how do you? This is you just brought up about spooking deer. That is the one hard part about hunting mast areas.
Yeah,
because it's almost like a cornfield. It's like they're coming out to that, whether it's on top and in a lot of the areas I hunt, you hunt, like a lot of times they're coming up versus going down, which is really tough. Like I talk to guys from other states that a lot of times they're going down to ag. There's like ags in the bottom,
right,
even in and honestly that's, I'm not saying it is I feel like it's easier to hunt when they're down lower because the thermal switch, everything starts coming down and you can, access from there. But when coming up on top, it's super difficult to get in position with them. And then also if they do come out, how do you get out? That's another hard. Do you run into that, or what's your how do you get away with that?
I can't say I get away with it 100%, just because I mean, when it's dark out, you don't know what's out there feeding. I mean, so like I said, I definitely bump deer. I'm not going to say I don't, but I usually try to mark some of the bedding in my my spring scouting where these deer are, where they're bedded at, where the feed areas are at. I try to just kind of stagger behind it. Yeah. We'll say I had this one ridge I hunt in particular, there's a little bit of doe bedding right just starting to go up. It comes onto this long ridge, and I mean they're always bedded there, and I'm I try to set up with that crosswind, so I'm sitting there with the wind in my face, and usually they kind of come out in front of me and they'll work down the ridge a little bit, and it works a lot of times in the evenings, but in the mornings, I mean, I really, in late October, I don't put as much effect in spooking those does, because I know I got, I can get away with it a few times. Yeah. That's the main thing.
And I'm the same way. And during the rut, I'm not as, I mean, I'm still paying attention to access, but I'm not going to not hunt an area if I'm, I might spook something. It's like, the thing is, there's one doe bedding area that I hunted last year where I actually had a shot opportunity. It was I knew I was going to blow these does out. And it was the bucks aren't laying there, so
no,
they just know it's a doe bedding spot.
Exactly, they're going to check up anyway.
They're still going to check up.
All the scent is there still. They're going to check up on it, and that's what I'm kind of saying. Like,
yeah,
I don't want to spook them, but if I do, it is what it is.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because I had one hunt in particular too, where this was a fun group hunt type deal, and I had this area marked out. It was basically what I've been talking about: ridges, bunch of laurel, and doe bedding on it. But it had a ton of mass crop on it. It had chestnut oak, a little bit of white oak, and a bunch of red oak. So every year, some of my buddies, my brother, we'll do a group hunt, just for more like camaraderie, and just fun, just. You know how the big woods grind can get to you. It's fun to just switch it up.
You need this,
yeah. Just memories, making memories out there and stuff. So we went into this area, and I knew the wind wasn't right, but this was our schedules. This is the only thing that our schedules would line up for. So I'm like, hey, we're gonna go up in there and we're gonna see what happens. So they didn't know this area prior to this, so I'm like, oh, hey, I marked a couple pins for those guys. So got my one buddy set up. My brother got set up in the saddle, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go jump up here, and I already had my stuff picked out, a month ago. Yeah. So I'm like, okay, it's just going to be fun. We see some deer, whatever, and it's like 8:30, 9 o'clock. I get a text from my brother. Oh, I just shot a good one. I'm like, oh yeah, and when we walked up in there in the dark, There were does snorting. They were going. They were up there feeding already, and like I said, we didn't get away with it. Yeah. Well, it didn't matter because those does, they were there. They were the bait, and Ty got up in there. He shot a nice old buck up in there, and then literally 15 minutes, my buddy, he's only maybe 200-300 yards away from Ty. He shoots a decent 2.5-year-old. Yeah. And then it's like 11:30. I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I just hear a couple grunts, man, and I freaking swing back on this climber and get ready. This freaking nice 9-point comes chasing this doe right by me. I stop him, and 28-yard shot, ended up getting both lungs, and he didn't go 50 yards. Oh, it's just like, yeah. Like, what just happened, Like, I shot a buck, Ty shot a buck, and Dustin shot a buck, and literally an hour and a half time frame on public land. And, it was just one of the most epic hunts I'll ever remember.
You'll never forget that.
No, and Ty's was an older deer. I think his was probably a 6 or 7-year-old. It was actually going downhill a little bit. Mine was a nice 5.5-year-old, like, mid 130s buck, and just a gorgeous mountain buck. But like, I'll never forget that memory of just dragging 3 bucks out of there all together on public land, side by side.
Yeah, like, and that's the thing is, like, you just don't know what could happen with the rut, and It's like anything can happen at any time, and you get. You might only get a day or so out of the year, a couple days where you get that kind of action. Yep. And the fact you have 3 is in there and all shoot a buck, like, yeah. No, I remember seeing the photos of that. It's like, that is so wild.
Yeah, I just can't believe stuff like that sometimes when it happens to you. It was a good area. Like, I knew it was a hot area.
Yeah, and I know, I'm sure you had it scouted.
Yeah, I had it scouted, but it just, like, I never thought, like, I was one buck I was going to be happy with, like, oh, Ty shoots a nice buck, Dustin shoots a nice buck, like, heck yeah, this is going to be fun getting this buck out of here. And like I said, I just remember, going to Ty, he's like, oh yeah, I got a buck. And then Duke's over there, oh yeah, I got a buck. And I'm like, well, boys, guess what? I got a buck. And like, they know I'm pretty picky too. I'm not, I'll hold out for a mature buck, and they couldn't wait to, get up and see it. And it's just one of those memories, man, that I'll never forget.
Oh yeah, man, that is so awesome. And what was the date on that one?
I want to say maybe November 2nd.
Okay.
Yeah, November 2nd or no, it was the 5th. It was the 5th, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, because the year before I shot my buck on November 2nd. But yeah, that was a November 5th buck. And like, the rut just starting to, heat up. But it just tells you the importance of those hot areas and finding that sign. And, sometimes you got to get aggressive with it too.
Yeah, and going, until you find those does, and that's and it is tough sometimes where, like, not knowing that these does already come into heat, you
right.
know, or are they going to, like, there's always this like unknown part of doing it, but you really can't, I feel like it's not a bad move if you just position yourself around does.
Right.
You know,
yeah,
like
no,
that's you don't know what could happen at that time frame, you know. And last year I spent quite a bit of time kind of in between doe groups, and I've had luck with that in the past, but it was getting real slow, and I was like, I need to switch, and I know there was, and it was just like once you spend so much time out there, you start to remember things even from the past. I went to a spot, I had no cameras, I had them in the area, but not in this spot, and I hadn't even been in this place. I think I walked through it in the spring, but I remember there's always does in these blowdowns, and I'm like, and I remember 5-6 years ago when I used to hunt this bottom a lot, that it was always that November 6th to 14th was when that bottom heated up. And I'm like, and it was November 7th, and I'm like,
it's time.
Let's do it. Like, let's go try it.
What I got to lose?
Just go sit on the downside of it. And then, you know, I had a shot opportunity, but it was just like, you know, sometimes you just got to see the cards you're dealt and not be like, well, you know, I know they're going to come through at some point. It's like, okay, well, you're running out of time here, buddy. So like, you got to figure something out. You know, I was getting ready to head to West Virginia, and I'm like, I got to make a move. And, and that's the hardest thing I feel like for me in the rut is like knowing when to make a move versus waiting out the spot you're in. And I feel like that's everyone kind of goes through that a little bit.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think hunters overthink their setups, kind of get in their head a little bit, or?
Yeah, I think I know for me, like sometimes you lose confidence when you're not having you have expectations and then it doesn't pan out. So you lose that confidence a little bit. Where it helps me is that I just have backup plans already ready, and it's like, okay, things aren't working out, then I need to move to this spot and check it out. And then, you know, and then it's like being aggressive until you find that spot, and then boom, and sit there and go through it. But I definitely think, like, you know, I'll have guys message me on Instagram and be like, you know, this is, you know, they're telling me these things, and all these pros are lining up like, okay, that's a pro, it's a pro, it's a pro. There's does there's scrapes there's rubs, there's everything. And it's like, he's like, what do you think I should do? It sounds like you're in the right spot, man. Like, you just need a little more time. Like, I that sounds pretty good to me. And it's tough to figure that out. But the rut can be such a magical time.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too. Like, everything is so situational anymore. I mean, every area is different. You don't know everything about the area too, and you want to help these guys. You want to help these guys to the best of your ability. But I mean, like, you can only give them so much. I mean, without actually stepping foot on the property. I mean,
or asking a million questions, you know, like back, like they might, I always say that it's like, okay, you know, someone will send me a map, be like, hey, look at it. I'm like, man, like this is going to take like 8 hours of back and forth, me asking questions, looking at it. And cause like, there's so much that you need to know before you can make be confident in a decision.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to send somebody on a wild goose chase.
No. And no, you're exactly right. And it's just, it takes time for sure to know that stuff. And, you know, with the amount of scouting you do and your trail cameras, I mean, and one thing that, you know, I heard you say it a little bit ago, and I remember talking to you back in December or January or something, and you're like, you basically had your spots for next year kind of picked out based off, you know, depending on, you know, what the mass look like and stuff, but you think way ahead and you have a lot of things prepped. Is that accurate?
Yeah, you know, you're 100% right on that. I mean, I like I said, I've been at it for a decade now, scouting out there. I've put certain pieces together, certain mass cycles together, and you know, you get a really good year like that, the bucks, they lay all the sign out for you. So, you know, dropping pins on these different areas, and now I'm at the point where, okay, I might have 10, 15 spots, and it's like, okay, I'm going to wait for this exact mass cycle. I'm going to jump in there because I know the deer are going to use it the same way that they did in the past because nothing's changed. The mast is the same, the bedding's the same, the terrain's the same. So I'll jump into those same exact areas and find success in them.
Yeah, no, that is such good. And what you just said there about the mast cycles and paying attention to it.
Yeah.
I look at the same thing from a weather standpoint.
Okay.
It's like you look at like 2020, I remember it was super hot. We've had a few hot ruts here recently.
Last couple of years, yeah.
I remember 2020, it was just like, incredibly hot, and it's like, and some of the deer were down lower and in the creek bottoms and some of these things that I like. And then it's like, okay, well, if the next year is super cold, well, I can't expect some of the same type activity because things had changed. So, but I always keep that in my mind, and I'm looking at my stuff, and it's like, all right, what's the conditions looking like? When was the last year that we had similar conditions?
No, and that's what you need to do too.
Yeah.
I mean,
and what you said that about the mast, it's like that is so. I mean, that is so spot on, and I've talked about it a lot on the podcast before. But a situation I remember in 2019. And it was an area that I was in that I scouted that spring prior. I found all this sign on the top, and it was insane. And then I get in there, I check my cameras, it's a ghost town. Well, the acorns rotted real early.
That'll do it.
And there was no deer anywhere. And then I drop off the mountain, go a couple benches down, and then all of a sudden there's a bunch of cherries and beech nuts. Okay. And it's like, that's where the deer were.
Yeah.
But so all that sign before was dead, but it's like, so, that can throw things off quite
definitely.
a bit.
I mean, they're going to shift, you know what I mean? Like, okay, they're not going to be feeding in an oak flat that doesn't have any browse, doesn't have any acorns. Like, they're going to shift onto whatever preferred food source. And I can give you a good example where I learned a lesson on this one too. So it was a dewberry bottom, okay? And I went in there postseason scouting, and I mean, it was some of the best sign I've ever seen. I'm like, wow, things really came together in this spot. So the next year I got a bunch of cameras in there. Oh man, I'm going to kill a good one in here. I mean, there were just hammer rubs. I mean, I knew where the does were bedding in this little swamp piece. And so I start my scouting in there. I'm like, okay, I'm not really seeing a whole lot in September, not a whole lot of sign. Set the cameras. Like, okay, I'll give it some time to heat up, Well, I go back in there in late October. There is no sign. It is a complete ghost town. There is maybe one or two scrapes opened up. I mean, does kind of shifted out of there, and I'm like, what happened? What was the reason why they're not in here again? And I just thinking about it was the weather. Because that prior year we had snow early and it got cold and it shifted some of those does into the dewberries during the rut. And I never would have, without putting in so much time out in the woods, the woodsmanship abilities, like I never would have thought that, but like now it made perfect sense to me because like I said, it was a ghost town the year before. There was snow, it was cold, and they kind of like migrated a little, not migrated, but they shifted. Into these dewberry bottoms to feed because there was snow, and I mean they weren't in the cuts nearly as much, and there must have been some late estrus activity in there, and it just. Those bucks came in and were tearing everything up. And like I said, you're spot on with the paying attention to the weather, paying attention to the mast.
Yeah, that can make and that's where, like I said, I talk a lot about historical data and I love it for trail cams, but there's always asterisks with that of like, what were the conditions that lined up with it too to be able to kind of figure that out.
Yeah, because a photo is worth nothing if you don't know the conditions that led to it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, based off of last year and last few years, going into the 2024 rut, like are you changing anything? What's kind of your thoughts about it?
Okay, so we're actually looking at the same mast cycle as last year. All those same setups are looking good.
Yep.
I mean, the bucks are there. They're already starting to shift into there as we speak, basically.
Yeah.
Last week or so, they've been showing up. So my normal ridge, acorn, bedding, those are looking pretty good this year. But there's one caveat to that is I have another spot that I've been paying attention to. There's no mast in it whatsoever. And historically for me, those areas have been the hardest to target a mature buck in. Just no like definitive food source other than browse. So you don't get a whole lot of that concentration of the does and stuff. But I have one absolute really nice buck that I have in that spot that I would love to just give it my all. And being on a new shift, I can hunt, I can hunt real close to where I think he's bedded at with the right winds and hit it really hard most of October. So I'm kind of like on the fence about that. Or if I want to jump into my old areas that I have history with some of those deer, they're 8.5 years old, 2 of them I know. But it's definitely looking like a good season. I mean, there's no shortage of good bucks out there this year, and probably one of the best recruitment I've ever seen, to be honest with you.
Yeah. What about like with your setups even? So like you talked about the areas, but are you going to tweak any setups, or do you feel like you're like, I was in them, like I don't want to change anything?
I'm going to say my scouting is going to, in the next couple of weeks, is definitely going to dictate a little bit of that, but I'm going to say I'm pretty spot on the money. I mean, I don't think those does shifted much because the food sources are exactly the same. They should theoretically use the same bedding.
Yep.
So I think that I'm going to jump in with the same mindset I had last year and hope just for a little bit more luck.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good answer. I like it.
We're going to try some filming too, so that's going to be some challenging stuff added to it. I mean,
yeah, that's
it's not easy
fun.
to do. Yeah. I haven't decided yet, though. I mean, I don't know how you do it, but would you kill the buck if you don't have the shot?
100%.
100%? Okay.
I have not successfully self-filmed one yet where it didn't walk out of frame or do something.
Okay.
And I don't know. I just have the killing mindset first, but probably going to get those results unless I do that.
Yep.
I'm not willing to do it at this point. Maybe at some
that's what I'm going to struggle with too, because I mean, I got a good buck in front of me, a target buck especially. A buck I got years of sheds off of. I think I might settle with the story on that one. Just come together and kind of share all the B-roll.
Yeah, you can tell a story
without the shot.
Yeah. Heck, that one that it's one of my best videos that I had on YouTube as far as performance-wise is that one that you saw me getting at the tailgate.
You're right.
And I didn't even pull my camera out that morning, but like I documented everything leading up to it and then everything after it, and it was like the story was still there, just wasn't the
I remember
shot.
watching that. Yeah, no, that was awesome. I mean, just putting all the pieces together, even the trail cam data. You had the shed antlers off too, which was impressive as well.
I was thinking about that earlier. That might be the only one that I've killed that I've had opportunities that I've blown at other ones, but not like that might be the only one that I've actually killed that I had matching set of sheds off of, which is pretty cool. After we're done here, I'll show you them in the
I'd love to see them. I remember seeing them online, but I mean that was a good buck. And how much of a jump did he make from year to year?
He put on 15 inches.
15, yeah. That's what I figured, because I remember seeing him in the parking lot that day. And then I normally don't stop people, but you were standing by your truck.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he must have a buck.
Yeah.
I think your dad was dad was there too. I'm like, oh, he must have a buck. So, I got to lay eyes on him.
Yeah, it was just so funny.
It was just crazy how it lines up. And, I'm sure we've been on each other's trail cameras before. I've had you.
Oh, yeah, you've had me on camera.
I had you at one time looking for elk sheds too. I'm like, and I still have that photo.
yeah, because that was before I knew you. But your brother texted me and was like, "You've been caught." Like, and like, where at? And it was funny. And then I was actually going through trail camera data from the last 5 years and looking at daylight times and dates and all this stuff, and I went through one from, I think it was 2020, somewhere around there, and I had you on, and I didn't know it was you at the time.
Okay.
And I knew you at that point, but I don't know if I just didn't see the photo or what happened, but I remember seeing a guy, and then I realized it was you in the summertime, and I started laughing. I'm like, yeah, we've crossed paths.
Yeah.
I remember that one time last year, where I was in an area and I was like, man, there's a lot of cameras in here. I thought I escaped all of them. Yep. And then you send me a message. You're like, got ya. And I'm like, how did I said I thought I escaped all of them, but you picked me up.
Yeah, just one of them.
Yeah.
you did escape all of them because I didn't have a single picture of you on the other one.
Yeah.
That was a pretty tight cluster that year too.
You did have a tight cluster. I was like, man, I was going through. I'm like, there's either a ton of pressure or it's one person looking for a buck.
A giant, yeah. It wasn't even a giant in that area, but there were some good bucks in the area, that's for sure.
Oh, it cracked me up. It was,
it's all fair game. It's public land, and I mean, you put a lot of time into it, so it's nice to see you be successful as well. So
yeah, it is funny. Like, like because I've run into other people that I know in the woods too, and it's like when someone's like, "Oh, I got you on camera," I'm like, "Well, I must be in a good spot," especially when I know they're a good hunter. I'm like, "Oh, I must be doing all right." But no, it's pretty funny. But I think this year is gonna be. I think it's gonna be a pretty awesome year, and just looking forward to seeing how things shake out, man.
Riding it out. I mean, that's all you can do, and you got a couple awesome elk tags as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna have a crazy fall.
Yeah, no, man, it should be super good, and I wanted to, before we end this, I want you to let everybody know where they can follow along with your stuff and everything, because you had started a YouTube channel here recently.
I did, yeah. It's just kind of dabbling a little bit in it, but definitely something I'm interested in. It's called Outdoor Fit. You can find that on YouTube, and then my Instagram's JohnPro28.
Yeah, check and his Instagram, and you got awesome photos. Like I said, you do a great job taking wildlife photography, and then shed season's always fun to follow along with you at.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool, man. But no, I appreciate you coming to meet up with me and taking the time.
I appreciate you for having me on here. Like I said, we talked about doing it before. It's nice to finally meet up and take care of it.
I know. I was thinking about it. I'm like, I know he's busy here, and I was like, but let's see if you were able to make it work. So
hey, you got to do what you got to do, man.
Heck yeah, buddy. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, share it with your buddies. Leave us a rating, a review, and subscribe. If you want to check out more content like this, there's plenty in the links below. We truly appreciate having you guys along with us.